Right, guys, so today I'd like to talk about why I think it's inevitable that UK must go underwater before it must burn with fire. So I'd like to show you a couple of pictures. This is what is called human zoos. This is English, and their colonialism when they would when they would have advanced weapons like cannons and rifles with which they would travel on their ships, and they would kill and enslave the native population of the land which they would unload on. And they would organize those armies for that, and then they would do this. These are not only brown skinned people. They did the same with Asians, Native American, Indian, what is called Indians. They did the same with India, which is India, which used to be called Hindustan. And yeah, they caught people and they organized human zoos as an entertainment. Okay, and do you see this? So they stole somebody's babies and then they played with a kid. So Russians didn't own brown skinned slaves. I'm just saying. When Russian traveled on the ships, they would marry the local women. Although they were white, and the women would have like yellow skin, red skin, brown skin, any sorts of tan on them, or any kind of difference in the shapes of anything or tradition. So if you see these people with big hats, and these big hats, this is very symbolic. It's like this gentleman class, upper class of England, and they seemed to symbolize their big brain, their how much thought they have in themselves. So this picture says in 1958 in Brussels there was Expo 58, a world exhibition in which the most advanced achievements of science and mechanics were presented. So this is exhibitions of Negroes in Brussels. And this is, you can Google this as this girl is in a human zoo in Belgium in 1958. The whites are feeding her bananas like a monkey. This was describing King of Belgium Leopold II, how much he killed. So this is like this, I would say English and French. Belgium, this is what speaks French also. And this peoples that kept colonies. So the same they did everywhere. They did this everywhere. So, but if you are going to find these articles in English, you are going to be deceived. So how do I see this as a deceptive? So, for example, people are watching Filipinos in a human zoo in 1985 USA. So these are Filipinos. Filipinos are actually like white, Asian, whatever. They just when they under the sun they tan, like a lots of whites do. So the forgotten history of human zoos. In the late 80s to well into the 90s, hundreds Europeans created human zoos in cities like Paris, Hamburg, Germany, Antwerp, Belgium, Barcelona, Spain, London, Milan, Warsaw, Poland, St. Louis, and New York City. These were popular human exhibits where whites went to watch black people who were on display. The black people were usually forced to live behind gates and in cages similar to animals in a zoo today. But you have to understand that they see everything as a commercial item, and they measure everything as a material objects in a way that they build their relationship with outside world, not only interpersonal relationships, in regards to what benefits or profits they get for themselves. This is the mindset. So they don't perceive humans as their brothers. They don't perceive other humans. They don't perceive animals as our younger brothers. So everything we have is thanks to the English. And so I'd like to say why this so-called woke website is deceiving. Because you will see that here the perpetrators of this are referred to as Europeans or as whites. This is a deceptive term. So they were neither whites nor Europeans. The perpetrators were English. Okay? And English in the what is called United Kingdom and minuscule Britain, they also did it with Irish. They traded Irish, who are usually people with very pale skin, red hair, green blue eyes, with speckles or whatever they called, the same way as they traded brown people from all these countries, from Oceania, Africa, whatever, and Indians, all the same way they traded them at the slave markets. It doesn't matter. The same way they did in Brazil. In Brazil, the market was also with white people. So why I think that this site was created by some agent. So this British English, they have agents everywhere. So this was a website not to depict the truth as it was, but to deceive people in a way that it would start fight within the society, kind of a civil war. Okay, so the whites would be against brown people, or Asians will be against white European nation. So you will see that these human zoos were in major European cities. And this was seems like that the perpetrators were the Europeans and whites. And they repeat multiple times in these articles. Congolese pygmy otter Benga was on display at the Bronx Zoo in New York City in 1906. He was forced to carry around chimpanzees and other apes, one of the many human zoos in France. A 20-year-old girl from South Africa known as Sarah Sarji Bartman was recruited to work in a Paris zoo because of genetic characteristics known as steatopygia, protuberant buttocks and elongated labia. Whites went to the zoo to look at her buttocks and at the other naked black women with the same shape. This is one of the France's many Negroes villages. It was said the village would often display blacks to dehumanize them and compare them to animals. This is another Negro village in France. The World Fair, where uncovered, semi-uncovered black women and children were presented at cages, Africans shooting archery. Black Africans are shown participating in archery in 1904. So the thing is that you do not understand how this works. So basically, these were the human zoos around the world, but, and this is very important because none of them who were slaves, whose ancestors were slaves, be it brown people or Asians or whoever, or I think only Irish know. None of them know that all these zoos on the territories of other countries, of European cities here, they belong to English. So all of these zoos actually belong to the English. They organize them, they build them, and they own them. These were the English, okay? These were the English, okay? Human zoos, also called ethnological expositions, were 19th and 20th century public exhibitions of humans, usually in a so-called natural or primitive state. The displays often emphasize the cultural differences between Europeans of Western civilization and European peoples or other Europeans with a lifestyle deemed primitive. Some of them placed indigenous people in a continuum somewhere between the great apes and humans of European descent. Ethnological exposition gave this critical, degrading, and racist. So I wanted to show you this photo. This is a photo of a brown person, and you can see that this jacket was very expensive to have. And this is from St. Petersburg. And you can see that this jacket, this is St. Petersburg, Russia. And you can see that the man has a lot of medals. You see this? So I'm going to read some articles for you. There was an interesting situation. England first participated in the slave trade from Africa, then started to covertly fight the slave ships, knew that her opponent, Russia, has nothing to do with the slave trade. This is why in the seas the English did not even examine Russian ships. And then the slave traders, finding out that Russian ships are not being examined by English, would hang Russian flag on them. This lasted not for a long time, and then international scandal occurred. It turned out that slave traders would hire ships which belonged to Russian citizens in order to secure themselves. Knowing this, Russia started to restrict rules of freighting those ships. Since that time, to fake it nobody managed to fake it. Africans in Russian Empire existed, but their position was much higher than in Anglo-Saxon countries. They were servants and the people working in the service industry. And under Nicholas I, any brown-skinned slave which crossed the border and appeared on the territory of the Russian Empire automatically became free. So the Luna Park in St. Petersburg. Luna Park was attended by 300,000 people a year. The ticket cost 1.5–2 rubles. The venture turned out to be much profitable, and then Russian shareholders decided to buy it out of English who owned it. This is Yeliseyev, advisor Shurigin, filed a plea for the mayor in order to let the Russians buy a scenic mountain road which belonged to the English society. So anyways, the other thing I wanted to mention was that recently there were 2 blasts with the mushroom clouds in Khmelnytsky, Ukraine, and another region. So these were the nuclear weapons blasts. And the cloud is going to Europe now, and these weapons were supplied by British, which they announced in all the media, in all international media. You can look it up that British bragged about supplying shells called storm shadows with unenriched uranium. But because this country is just a pathological liar nation, they didn't tell the truth because this was not an unenriched uranium. So this was a nuclear weapon blast, and they used these storm shadows before. They were used in Iraq on the Iraqi people, and they were used in Serbia on Serbian people. So they use it to people of Iraq, which are tanned people. And the same way they use them in Serbia on white people. Notice this. Anyways, when they use that storm shadow, there was no, like they have this nuclear waste detection. But when they use this storm shadow, there was no gamma rays detection. So that means that it was not unenriched uranium that went off there. This could have been just uranium, nuclear uranium, plutonium, something else that they invented, mixed up as a poison, aka as a blast. But the fact is the fact. Poland and then other European countries detected gamma rays which were not supposed to be in the unenriched uranium that they claimed that they supplied. So that means that they were going to organize a big bomb that would kill many millions of people. And now in Europe, where British conveniently exited, they are going to have this huge disaster because of their nuclear weapons. A lot of people, especially children, are going to die. They are going to die a very painful death, this leukemia, lung cancer, when you cough blood, this like glioblastoma, which is actually lead poisoning. So this is when people have such convulsions and seizures that they have to be tied to bed, and otherwise they can have their spine broken. They break their spine in those convulsions. So this is the basic principle how these heavy metals work, because they make nuclear weapons from heavy metals. So a lot of children and other people of Europe, millions probably, are going to die now. And they try to silence this information, but this is what British bring to the world. Well, they are a small island with just a few dozen of million people. So basically, in my case, when they poisoned my man and my little child, they worked through psychics, I believe, and for some reason they didn't want my son to be ever born. So they decided to kill, drive insane my man. And they prepared for his death, for my man's death, and the cover-up, such as before they killed him, before they poisoned him, they forced him to take a Jewish surname, Rosenthal. Okay, my man had surname James. He was Aidan James. So they, when he was an officer of US Air Force, to cover up this death, they forced him to take the surname Rosenthal. So why did they do that? It's because when English do most atrocious things around the world, where people in the country start to suspect conspiracies and that something smells fishy, they would use Jews as scapegoats. Okay? So they would use other people to cover themselves up, and it's like they have nothing to do with this. English have nothing to do with anything, but they are always the winner and the benefactor. They always stay in the shadow. The second point, when I tell that my man's real name was Aidan James, people would start to Google his name, and then they would find some kind of ugly, disgusting, so-called British soldier that went and fought on a side of ISIS, which is a terrorist organization that they made up. So basically, each time I seek for help, they would have this negative connotation because A, I'm Russian, B, they try to cover up as him being Jewish, and C, is that they prepare in advance for each murder. They work through psychics, they know future in advance, so they try to prevent this future from happening. And they delay each country in their development, like it happened to Russia for 20 years now. We are delayed in our development by 20 years. So in any case, it's necessary to note that they hate everybody who doesn't inbreed like them. Like if you go to their small island, they would be this kind of whitey people, all British, and they all look the same because they inbreed. And they especially like to kill their own people who are against this inbreeding, so that English only marry English, and if somebody in their country marries somebody from Pakistan or something like that, they are going to, die from cancer soon, or stuff like that will happen. So this cover up, what they do when they murder people, this involves a big chain of sleeper agents which are located around the world. So all these things that they perpetuate on humanity, those who are not inbred, and this I mean English and partly French nation, but not full, only French aristocracy. So the English, what they do to cover up this shit, like each time something about them turns up, like how they cause cancer through poisoning water, through vaccines, etc., etc. They have to use a lot of agents. So in scientific society, in journalist sphere, in a medical society, in engineering society, in physics, everywhere they have their agents, and there are so many of them, those that work for them. So this is not possible to do unless at least half of the population is involved in all these cover-ups, all these poisoning murder cases, those who rebel against their so-called science, indoctrination, hypnosis through mass media and commercial, and influencers, and so on and so forth. So this has to involve at least half of their island. So this is just not possible to cover up all of their crimes without this island, I mean UK, being at least halfway agents. So it is absolutely necessary that that island goes underwater. Then the peace will prevail. There are agents, sleeper agents located in other countries, but this will sort of be a signal to them, and I don't think that they will work the same way that they work until they all, gonna be obliterated. That's my opinion. So they are pathological liars and deceivers who like to pretend that they are victims and poisoners. They rely on poison. And everything they blame others in is actually what they do.